Welcome back after the ad break, and let's continue quickly looking at the four major industrial areas in South Africa. Now, we've already discussed Gauteng. The second biggest one is Durban Pinetown. And like I explained, the reason why it's so big is because it's got direct access to very good transport routes and because Durban Pinetown is a break of bulk point. If you can see it, it's got access to a shipping port, large markets, once again, plenty of skilled and unskilled labor force, many different kinds of raw materials, well-developed transport routes, access to money, a very good water supply. Now, if you look at the type of factories that we do find in this area over there, food processing factory, sugar refining factories. Now, if you look at the KwaZulu-Natal region, because it's quite a tropical climate, because of the influence of the warm Mozambique current, high rainfall area, excellent conditions for sugarcane farming. So keep in mind, the sugarcane are being farmed and being processed over there and eventually transported or shipped somewhere else. Motor manufacturing, if you travel to Amanzimtoti, there's a massive Toyota garage over there. And then we got oil refining making petrol, and there's also chemical factories. Our third largest industrial hub in South Africa is the Southwestern Cape. Now, the reason why it's the third largest, once again, good transport routes from Gauteng all the way to the South Cape Town. We have the N1, and then we have the N2 traveling all along the coast all the way to Durban. But once again, there's ports, there's harbors. Now, these harbors are being used to take the process to ship, export the processed material. Now, the factories have been here for a very long time. The simple reason for it, in 1652, the first settlers arrived in southern Africa. So because of historical regions, there's factories already established over there over a very long period of time. Once again, plenty of skilled and unskilled labor force, availability of farming products. Now, when I talk about the availability of the farming products, keep in mind that, as we discussed in the previous lesson, it's usually the wine farms. Now, what's being processed? It's not only the wine farms, but fruit farms as well. It's being processed in canned foods or in wine, and it's close to the harbour and is being shipped away, for instance, Europe or other countries. Once again, keep in mind it's a break of bulk point because the goods changes from one transport to another system of transport, mode of transport. The kind of industries that we experience over here is clothing and footwear factories, food processing, fish canning, and winemaking. Now, our fourth largest industrial region is the Port Elizabeth Uitenhage area, the Nelson Mandela Bay, and that's situated in the Eastern Cape province. Now, once again, break of bulk point, very importantly, access to a shipping port over there. The factories has been here for a very long time because of historical settlements. There's plenty of skilled and unskilled labor force, availability of the farming products. Now, Port Elizabeth Uitenhage stands out because of car manufacturing. VW and Mercedes-Benz is two of the biggest car manufacturing businesses down there. And leather goods factories over there, as well as textile factories making tiles and products. Now, over the years, like I've mentioned, we want to concentrate more on secondary activities because there's more money to be made, can be more profitable by manufacturing, processing this material and ship it away, export it so we can earn foreign exchange. So the government came up with some plans to improve our secondary economy. Now, as part of the development plan for underdeveloped regions in the South African government came up with two solutions. The SDIs, the Spatial Development Initiative, and the Industrial Development Zones. Now, what they basically want to try to improve over there is where can we create more industrial areas to benefit the people from that area. For instance, instead, what we want to do is we want to stop this rural-urban migration. We want to rather keep people in the areas where they are, but we need to bring the work towards them. Now, let's quickly look at the difference between the Spatial Development Initiative. It's a development corridor, and we used next to major transport routes, for example, a major highway. Now, one that developed recently was the Maputo Corridor. Basically, a highway was constructed between Maputo and Nelspruit. Now, what did this do? It improved the economy of both countries, because what we basically do is we ship coal, we transport it to Maputo, and it's being exported over there. But because of the building of this transport route, it improved tourism as well. Now, major small towns next to this highway are being exposed to people traveling on the road, and it makes interconnection between the two countries much better. It connects major industrial and mining areas. And so what the government basically do, it improves the infrastructure all along the development corridor, and it gives access to areas along the route. So what does it basically do? Places that never, quiet places, have access to this route, and it means they can do business in a better way because they've got access to this transport route, and it's easier to sell and receive their goods. Small towns and activities such as farming and tourism are developed along the route. Now, if you look at the industrial development zones, it's usually very close to harbours and airports. Now, these include existing factories and towns. Now, what the government tries to do is to improve the infrastructure and services to attract further development. The IDZs are linked to each other and other major cities by the SDIs. Now, when we look at tertiary economic activities, like we discussed, it's services. Now, these can be schools, hospitals, and shops. Now, if you look at it, the example that's been given by the textbooks was like supermarkets, car dealers, and clothing shops. And then we have our low order goods and high order goods. For instance, hairdressers are low order, doctors can be high order, and maintenance and repair shops. Now, very importantly, tertiary activities are divided into two sections, the formal sector and the informal sector. But we're going to focus on the informal sector because South Africa's got quite a big informal sector. But if you look at the formal sector, very importantly over here, Great Charles, the formal sector pays tax. It's businesses that are registered to pay tax. The informal sector do not pay tax. Now, once again, before I'm going to continue this topic, please do not get confused between informal settlements and the informal sector. An informal settlement lacks basic needs and services. For instance, townships and shacks. Okay, if you look at the housing structures made out of tin and wood, there's gravel road, there's not enough toilets, not enough decent, it's not running water, lacks sewage pipes, etc. So that's an informal settlement. I want to look at the informal sector, and when we look at the informal sector, is your hawkers selling cigarettes next to the road and cool drinks and chips and sweets and etc. and parking guards, and your casual labourers, for instance, tilers, painters. Now, I don't know if you've seen next to builders' warehouse, you will usually see the guys that's advertising himself as a carpenter or a plumber or whatever. But very importantly, these businesses are not registered. So if this, let's say for instance, this gardener came and worked for you, you pay him cash. He doesn't pay any tax on that money that he receives. Now, there you can see, and same as cleaning staff. It's usually people being paid cash on a daily basis. They do not correspond by paying tax. Now, if you look at the characteristics, usually self-employed, you work for yourself, you don't work for a boss. Now, women and children are mainly involved in this sector, especially cleaning ladies. It's associated with casual labor, like I've mentioned. If you go outside builders' warehouse, you will see these general laborers. Can be a plumber. And when I'm saying a plumber, obviously not a qualified plumber, a carpenter, or for instance, a painter. It employs the unskilled and semi-skilled workers. Now, the importance of this informal sector, believe it or not, even though it's not tax registered, This jobs provides for the people's needs. This jobs improves their standard of living. It provides an income for them. Now, before they're going to be unemployed, these people can earn some type of income. Now, the informal traders are more accessible to working class consumers. Now, for instance, you'll find them on a street corner selling their product. So it's quite easy to get your product from them. The consumers can buy goods in smaller quantities and at a lower price, because many of these informal traders will go to the markets, buy their fresh produce and sell it in their local community. And believe it or not, it creates opportunities, and entrepreneurial skills are being developed because they're basically teaching themselves how to trade. Quite a valuable lesson that they learn. Now, the reason for the development and the reason why we had such a big, massive informal sector in South Africa is because of job losses. Now, unfortunately, in the formal sector, there's an increase in the number of people who basically lose their jobs, and eventually what will happen, they start working for themselves, they create their own opportunity, and the informal sector will grow because of this. Now, if you look at, especially on the farming area, if you look at primary economic activities, greater mechanization, it means basically what happens, a lot of work that the people used to do on the farm, machines are doing now. So that means those people becomes unemployed. And same in industries, if you look at the car industry, for instance, most of the cars are being built by robots. So back in the day, people used to build it, and what makes it, it forced the people, because they're being unemployed, because robots are basically building these cars, and now they need to fend for themselves, and they go and work on the informal sector. Now, unfortunately, people who lack qualifications are less likely to be employed, and eventually they won't be able to find a job in the formal sector. Now, I'm talking even a matric qualification as well. You're going to struggle immensely to find a decent job in the formal sector where you pay tax if you don't have a matric qualification. So most of the people who don't finish school, or have got no qualification, usually ends up in the informal sector. And then the reason why South Africa's informal sector is quite big as well is because of immigrants from other countries such as Mozambique and Zimbabwe. They can't find legal work because they're illegally over here, so they can't find work in the formal sector. And what do they need to do? They need to form some sort of income, and they join the informal sector just to provide themselves with basic needs. Now, unfortunately, there's some challenges in the informal sector. If we look at that quickly, traders are frequently harassed by local authorities because sometimes it's illegal because they're not paying tax. The government can't take advantage of it, of the products they sell, and the government can't make money from them. Now, the traders do not have access to proper trading facilities. For instance, where do you see most of your informal traders? Next to the road. Let's say, for instance, we experience our summer rainfall, so they can't be protected by the natural elements. As you can see, they're being exposed to the weather conditions. Now, unfortunately, to get yourself started, if you work in the formal sector and you want to start your own business, you go to the bank and you provide a business plan, and they might give you a loan. But unfortunately, if you live in work in the informal sector, the chance of giving a loan is not really going to happen. The bank doesn't actually want to loan their money to informal traders. And then once again, it's quite unpredictable. They're not going to have a steady income. It can differ from one day to another, earning more money than one day and less money. So it's not a steady income, unfortunately, for the informal sector. Now, how can we improve the informal sector? Local authorities, the government can provide specific areas for them to trade. For instance, a market where the informal trading can take place. The local authorities can provide infrastructure, like for instance, build them a building where they can do their trading to take place, hawker stalls, for example, close to taxi ranks, for example. And banks can make a plan and, for instance, give them access to bank loans and create a way so they can start their business like in the formal sector. And what local authorities can do as well is basically provide them with training to improve their trading skills and help them to develop their own businesses, maybe into a formal business where they can pay tax and the government can add to it as well. Now, this type of questions that you can expect in your final exam paper. Now, please remember, in our previous episode, we looked at concepts and definitions. Now, they are vitally important to understand what's going on in the section that we just discussed. Now, if we quickly look at matching column A with column B. If we look at trade, match column A with column B. Now, if you look at trade, what will be the correct answer over there? Trade will be number C. Buying and selling goods or services. I'm trading something. I'm buying a product from you. Or for instance, your services, you are fixing my toilet. So that is a trade. If we look at imports, that will be number E. It's commodity brought into the country. We're buying something from other country. If you look at decentralization, we already looked at that before in our previous sections. That's number D. Movement of activities away from centralized areas. For instance, there's businesses that moves away from the CBD because it's too congested or it's just too busy, or maybe because the land value is too expensive, like in the CBD, and they move somewhere else where it's a bit cheaper. If you look at trading blocks, that will be number A. Groups of countries that have common markets and trade agreements. Now, the industrial development zones will be number B. Will there be letter B? Industrial estates aimed at economic growth and new investment. Now, if you look at the informal sector, we already looked at that just now. It's basically where they don't pay taxes, and that is number I. The trade involving businesses not registered with the government and occupying premises illegally. Okay, MEDCs, you've actually learned about it in grade 10 and 11. More economic developed countries such as England, Australia and America, and that will be number K. Countries that are more developed than others. Multinational corporations, number 8 will be J. Companies that has factories, offices or shops in different countries. Give you an example, for instance, McDonald's, KFC, KPMG, PwC, quite a few of them already established in South Africa. LEDCs, less economic developed countries, learned about it in grade 11, that will be number H. Countries that are less developed in the world, also referred to as the third world countries. And last but not least is globalization. We looked at the previous lesson to that, and that's number G. That's the way in which activities of countries across the world are interconnected. After the break, we're going to continue with a couple of more activities. So just stay tuned.